Morning, everyone. Welcome to the 16th annual conference online. I hope everybody is able to hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Fine. So the first session is Beyond Cataract, and for that we have Dr. T.P. Das here to start the session, and Dr. Umang, who will be moderating it. Welcome, Dr. T.P. Das, Dr. Umang, and can I hand it over to you now? Thank you.
Thank you, Sridevi. 22 years ago from now, that is exactly 1998, Bedi Prasad published a paper in Lancet, and the title was Is the current eye care policy focus almost exclusively for cataract adequate to deal with the blindness in India? This was not taken very kindly because timing was not perfect. 1998, we were still struggling with the cataract, and at that time, we just finished training a huge bunch of people headed by the World Bank sponsored cataract surgery. But the message was that as we progress, society progresses, the cataract surgical surgery, both backlog and the current one would reduce. Last year or year before last, when the World Report on Vision published the data of 253 million people in the world either blind or visually impaired, they said that cataract was 5%, diabetes and AMD together 5%, glaucoma 3%, uncorrected refractive error 49%, and corneal opacity 1.7%. And we thought that this cataract rate is so low. And then last year, when Professor Praveen Basid, his nationwide RAP survey, and luckily he also find out less than 50 year, not necessarily 50 year plus. Can others mute their mic? Then only I can be more comfortable. And then he said in the entire population, 25% was cataract, close to what global data is. Indian data of uncorrected refractive error reduced to 30% only, but diabetes AMD 2%, glaucoma was higher than the world average of to 5.5%, and corneal opacity was the highest, was 14% in India compared to world data is. So that means we have moved out of that only a cataract centric area. This year, February, published India data of the 72 million people in the country, 32% have some form of retinopathy and 20% have got a sight-threatening retinopathy. 40 million people have got glaucoma. That means we cannot stay cataract focused. By saying that, I did not mean that we should not do cataract, we should not focus on uncorrected refractive error, but you have to add other diseases also. So this session, which Umang has so nicely put with so nice people, we said that beyond cataract, from the policy point of view, what can we do to reduce the blindness so that by 2030, that will be vision for all as being the motto of the WHO and IAPB. Umang, to you now.
Thank you, Dr. Das. No one better than you to keep that focus. I think at the stage we are in India, cataract does remain the most important cause of blindness, as the recent RAP survey has shown. It also has shown that one of the most common cause of blindness is complications of cataract surgery. So we still have a lot to do in cataract. But having said that, other diseases like like glaucoma, corneal blindness, diabetic retinopathy, and even newer diseases for India like macular degeneration all become very important. So with that in mind, we have very good talks here today. People who have been working in the community and also dealing with other than cataract problems. To start with, we have Subhish from Chitrakoot, and Subhish heads the community department at Chitrakoot, and he'll be talking of their work in preventing blindness from diabetic retinopathy. So Subhish, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Umang, for such a kind introduction and giving this opportunity. I think I can share my screen. Yeah. I hope it is visible to everyone. So once again, thank Team Vision 2020 for this wonderful opportunity. I also would like to thank my organization, Jain sir, Ilesh sir, and also Dr. Alok for giving me the opportunity to represent. He is the one actually take lead in our diabetic retinopathy program in Sadhguru Netra Chikitsalaya. So like Dr. Umang has rightly mentioned, I'm going to talk very briefly about a recent initiative we have piloted, which is like Dr. T.P. Das also was mentioning about, you need policies and ideas for looking at the new emerging diseases like diabetic retinopathy. So when you look at the predictions and scenarios were clearly saying there is going to be an increase in both diabetes and diabetic retinopathy, which is definitely a concern. But to me, as an eye care provider for underprivileged, more concerning is the existing health-seeking behavior. We were talking beyond cataract. So I'll give you an example of cataract itself. If you look at the success of our cataract program, and I definitely not undermining the importance of the strategy or the efforts of organization taken so far, but I'm saying one of the most contributing factor on this success was somehow it was fitting to patients' existing behavior. I mean, if you look at the underserved, they will come to you only when there is a real problem and they don't find any solution. I mean, when you give a solution, they will accept it. More chances is there when there is no other option is there. And I'll explain you why it is. The real challenge in cataract, you are giving a solution to a problem which they were facing. But in diabetic retinopathy, you're giving a solution where a problem which is supposed to come later. I mean, that is a fundamental difference. And I think rather the number of diabetes or diabetic increasing, the biggest problem is how do you give a solution before the problem arises. I mean, where the treatment was the focus in cataract, which somehow patient was able to take up, and the result, if you look at, unless there is no other comorbid condition, the result was excellent, where which they were propagating this. So I'll give you a detailed example of that. If you look at the advantages we had in cataract, so all these advantages we had in cataract was actually becoming a disadvantage for diabetic retinopathy. Look at patient satisfaction level. So if you do a cataract surgery for a bilateral or unilateral cataract patient, and unless and until they don't have a comorbid condition, their vision is restored, and there is a higher amount of satisfaction. Now look at diabetic retinopathy. Even if they come at a very late stage, the reversal of the vision restoration is almost nil. I mean, the patient, those who even undergo treatment for diabetic retinopathy also won't be propagating this treatment and services. Again, if you look at community, people are proud to take part because they can simply say, I have contributed 500 surgery, done 500 people got new life and all. Now, if you look at diabetic retinopathy programs and everything, it is very complex. They can really see what is the impact of their effort. Similarly, if you look at ease of access, after a cataract surgery, you can go to a primary eye care center and do a follow-up. But when you comes to a diabetic retinopathy, even they access, they need more advanced facility to continue that. And again, there is a cost involved where I would say if you look at diabetic retinopathy and cataract, this is just opposite, where a lot of cost is involved, and including the follow-up. Even in cataract, just for one follow-up, we need to put a lot of effort. We need to say we'll be giving you a free spectacles. All these things we do then to ensure follow-up. Now for diabetic retinopathy, where you need continuous follow-up. So altogether, if you look at, there are a lot of disadvantages, and I think that is a bigger challenges where we had advantages in cataract. So looking at all these things and considering all these challenges, we devised a sort of a project, a sort of a piloting where we have done in Satna district. So one thing we were convinced, which is already known, apart from the treatment, you cannot do everything by ourselves. But problem with eye care, we are known for becoming island of excellence. I mean, we try to devise a parallel system for everything. For reaching the community, we have outreach camp. For permanent visions, and we have, I mean, somehow we are excluding the existing health system. We keep talking about integrating of health system, but I think this is the right moment where diabetic retinopathy can only be tackled with health system integration and an increased participation from the community. So I'll give you how we have devised this. where we are decided the identification of diabetic cases is not our job, which will be done through NCD clinics and community health centers and ASHA workers. And then again, the mobilization for the DR screening, again, it become the responsibility of ASHA, government ophthalmic assistant, professional body like Indian Medical Association and local NGOs. And again, screening. When you have a vision center, you have a tendency to say, no, we'll do the diabetic retinopathy screening at vision center. But we feel at this moment, to create an awareness and creating, you need to do at a common place and later shift to the vision center. So this was the strategy we used. And again, we need to consider the cost is involved. You cannot do everything free, just like cataract. So we need to devise a mechanism where you ensure, I'll explain you that, ensure that underserved community also getting benefit out of it. And again, follow up, like I mentioned, you need to equip your vision center or primary eye center so that follow up is also happening. So these were the key stakeholders, where the government, district administration, the local DBCS system, the NCD clinics, IMAs and NGOs were involved in the program. And this, you can see, this is our director is explaining to our district magistrate and the entire stakeholders how the program is going to take. So we have taken 5 areas in rural where we have a primary eye care center connectivity, keeping in mind the follow-up is happening through the vision centers. And we also estimated what is the population each this rural area is having, and what is the population we can ideally serve within 15-kilometer radius. And we also identified what number of camps we need to do each of the area to ensure all the diabetic patients are screened. Similarly, in urban area also, we identified 5 places where we have a connectivity to our vision center and a city clinic, which is an upgraded version of primary eye care center. Here also, we calculated how many number of camps, how many number of diabetic patients to be identified. So then once the area is identified, you call the people, especially the government ophthalmic assistants, ASHA workers, and also that they are, this basically, this is not a skill transfer or they are going to do the detection, but this is all about building a team and building ownership among them. And then through NCD clinics, and this, you can see a screenshot of where ASHA is identified diabetic patient through the health center. And then with a mutual consensus, once the listing was done, okay, this areas, this many patients are already identified, then we have decided on a screening date, and where on a mutual decided time we have done the screening. Like I rightly mentioned, the screening was happened at the health centers. And importantly, apart from the screening, that the teamwork of the community participation or the involvement of government and NGOs people, I think that was a key fundamental thing, wherein which you can see a good number of diabetic patient turns in. And also, not only the community have a responsibility. If you look at the cataract, you go with a direct ophthalmoscope, but now to give a space in the community, you also think, so we have a very dedicated mobile van wherein which you can do a detailed slit lamp examination and fundus examination. Then with the help of Forest technology, this image being transferred to Sadhguru Netra Chikitsalayaya, where you decide whether this patient need, there is a DR change or not, or which patient need a follow-up or a detailed examination or treatment at the base hospital. And we also use technology. You can see this is the blood testing area. We have used the technology. I mean, we were everything done through a system wherein which you can follow up is done. So I'm quickly coming to the result. So we could screen around, this was the first phase, like I likely mentioned. So we have done one camp in East 10 areas. So among the 10 camps, we could serve 1,518 patients. I'll give you important insight on this. If you look at the referred diabetic retinopathy patient, means these are either PDR patients or severe and very severe NPDR patient. So again, you can see in red, I highlighted the rural. Among the total diabetic patient attended the camp, 10% was referred. And in urban, it was 6. Altogether, if you look at among the total attended the camp, 8% was needing urgent attention for diabetic retinopathy. So you can see the increase in the rural, which is mainly because if you see another graph, which will explain you, out of the total patient who reached the camp, 71% among the rural was having uncontrolled sugar level, meaning RBS of more than 160, and urban it was 52. So this was the greater reason for the same. And also I want to show you another important thing. We know, like we talk about integration, the data also suggests integration, because if you look at those who are identified priorly as diabetes, only 9% were suggested to have an eye examination. Urban also, it is not good. I mean, out of the 100 patients reached to a healthcare worker for diabetes, they were not told to go for an eye examination prior. So this is a real concern. And again, if you look at the eye examination done. Even the doctor said for a few people, among that was only 5% reached. I mean, somehow the importance is not passed on. Maybe if as a formality, they might have told you can just go for an eye examination, but somehow it is not reflecting to action. And another important thing, like I mentioned, 8% was referred to Sadhguru Netra Chikitsalayaya for immediate care. And rightly I mentioned, we were into consideration, not like cataract, you can't say everything is free, but we made sure this communication is clear. Those who are underserved, like BPL, they have a system wherein which they can go for a free treatment. But still, if you look at the compliance, it was only 51%. And I'll give you a further insight. If you look at the rural compliance, I mean, out of 100 patients referred for detailed examination at Sadhguru, only 35% comes in, which is the biggest problem. And we also call back the patient who are actually not turned to hospital. There actually, the main reason was they were not taking it seriously. I mean, if you look at no one to accompany, or I have some other important work, or, you know, I was making up the mind, I'm ready to come. So this was the major chunk. That means still a lot more made to go. And 2K. To sum up, you can see uncontrolled sugar is a problem because the diabetes is not getting identified on time, and referral attendance is very poor, especially rural area. And if you look at referable DR is high, that means there is a huge need in the community, and I'm sure it is challenging. And still I wanted to emphasize this: they are ready for a solution for a problem which is they are facing on a day-to-day life. But we need to shift that to a prevention mode, means before the problem arises, we are giving a solution. So I think it is very tough, but still integrated approach are the solution. You can see the ASHA workers, the integration I'm talking about, and everyone, including the media, has a role to play on it. And I think if we go together, definitely something like we have achieved in the cataract, we will be definitely able to achieve in the diabetes also. So thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm concluding here.
Thank you, Subhish. Wonderful talk. And I think the discussion on NCD integration with other health systems is important to tackle beyond cataract. I can see there are questions coming up in the chat box. I'm sure the faculty would be happy to answer them there. Sure. We'll see if we have time for discussion. We'll take them up later. But in the meantime, I would request all the delegates to put their questions in the chat box, and we can start answering, the faculty can start answering. So I would move to the next talk. I'm moving one talk up. I'll request Dr. Shailendra Sabharwal, who heads the Public Health Department at Shroff Charity Eye Hospital, about the interventions in, Subhish, can you unshare?
Yeah, I did that.
About the pediatric interventions in the community. We know refractive have interventions available there so that the children in our community get good eyesight. So over to you, Shailendra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Shailendra from Shroff Charity Eye Hospital. I'd like to thank Vision 2020 India to give me that opportunity. I'll be talking about children eye care, and I'll be talking about some of the interventions that we are taking up right now. So as we all know, children constitute about 30% of population. And we also know a child with visual impairment or blindness has an average much longer period to stay and maybe suffer from the condition. So the need is obvious. And to come to the first intervention, I think most of us would be doing this some sort of school screening. Just to share the numbers first, in the last 4 years, we have screened around more than 4 lakh children. This has been mostly in the urban slums or in the rural areas in Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh. So we have seen a great need. We sometimes read about this in the papers, but we, in our experience, have seen a need of almost 5 to 6% of glasses to be dispensed, and almost 0.2% requiring surgery. There was a publication from our institute in which we actually studied the accuracy of this non-cycloplegic refraction that we do. And just to validate what we are doing with what, in fact, all of us are doing in the field, what we found was that in almost more than 90% children with refractive error, If they have a refractive error of up to 4.5 diopter myopia, 3 diopter of cylinder or 1.5 diopter of hyperopia, the prescription that we were giving were very accurate. I mean, within the range of 0.5 diopter. So this validates actually the work we all of us are doing in the field. So the next step, I think, should be not only to look at the numbers, but move towards the quality in these programs. And I can share our experience. So what has helped us improve some of these quality parameters is actually sticking to known guidelines and making sure that all the people screening understand those guidelines and do the examination and referrals according to them. I think another thing which has greatly helped us in last 2 years or so is shifting to a software-based screening, and we are using the ReadSoft platform. What we have realized is the data management has suddenly improved a lot, and the opportunity for real-time monitoring has actually helped us improve our programs. Beyond this, some of these programs help us make this tab-based entries. So it's again a live entry, and you don't have to rely on papers and papers getting entered later and data getting lost. One more intervention which has helped us in our program is that in all our eye screening programs, we try to make Vision Center as the hub. Apart from giving a good, decent enough office space for the team, it helps us to actually plan regular visits of pediatric ophthalmologists to the center. It also it has helped us to reduce the dropouts because all the children being referred for cycloplegic refraction or an examination by the ophthalmologist are now referred to the Vision Center, which reduces the distance the parents have to travel, and they feel more safer in their own environment. And in the long run, we have seen some of the centers doing well because of this program, even beyond the existence of the program. So another thing that I think we all have to think about now is preschool screening, because here is the time when we pick up the amblyopia factors. And we have in last 2 years again moved to spot photo screener based screening. And in fact, we published our accuracy reports in IGO, and what we found was this photo screener was almost 85% had sensitivity to pick up the amblyopia risk factor in children under 5. So this has actually, this is what the accuracy of the program is. And one thing which I would like to also mention here is this preschool screening also keeps the team busy when the schools are closed. So there's enough to do when the schools are closed also. So just to add to our experience of under 5 screening with this photo screener, and we have suddenly realized that this is a data of 1,200 children still under review. So what we have seen is the referral rate with the same teams and almost the same geographical area in under 5 children has jumped from about 2.7% to more than 16%. With this, and when we calculated the positive predictive value, that is the number of true positives who were referred, it was above 80%. So this has actually really helped us and made us confident of under 5 screening, and we feel sometimes that part of the children's screening is neglected. Another thing which we noticed while screening in one of our very rural blocks in North Indian state was that with some of the program that we had done and some of a bit of modeling, we actually recently published this in ophthalmic epidemiology that even if we are able to do all the schools screening, we would still be able to reach in some of these blocks only around 35% of the school-going age group children. So what we feel is that in the next steps, we have to move, although we all know school screening is the cost-effective model, but we will have to look at the other models of out-of-school screening, and we are exploring what we can do out of school, the most cost-effective way of screening the children not in schools. Coming to the next field that we are trying to build into the public health scenario is retinoblastoma. As we all know, it's one of the most common eye cancer in children, with about 1 in 15,000 children getting affected. And the worst part is that almost 1/3 of those children will have both the eyes affected. And right now, around more than 25% of the children getting diagnosed in a year come from India. We all know it is untreated, it can be almost fatal in 100% of the cases. But the good part is that this childhood cancer, it's the highest survival rate among childhood cancers. And in Western countries has shown 95% survival. But picture in India is not that clear. We have about 50% children reporting with such advanced retinoblastomas, and 50% of them still die due to cancer. So in our oculoplasty department under Dr. Seema Das, who's also a specialist in childhood malignancies. So we have developed an integrated treatment center which controls not only the treatment but also the training. And as a next step, what we are including in our program is red reflex training for our community health workers and creating awareness in community through our existing network. ROP is another thing where India has the maximum number of preterm births in a year, and it has been shown that almost 10% of infants with blindness come from India, and this is increasing, and it's increasing from places which are not being screened. So what our experience in our retina department, we are training all our fellows for ROP screening. In the last 2 years in 2 government hospitals, we have screened more than 1,000 children and treated 68 of them with lasers. But what we have found in a recent research that we have published is that it is not only the eye screening, we have to look at the other sections of ROP care, whether it's oxygen monitoring or the regulation of oxygen delivery. One more field that we are trying to get into is corticovisual impairment, and with our department headed by Dr. Suma Ganesh, we have recently published also our some of the findings that we have from our patient that we have seen, but we know the need is much more outside in the community. So under Ms. Madhumita Bose, who's an expert, we have an early intervention center where we start rehabilitating these children. And what we are next intervention, we are into a program for CVI and multiple disability with visual impairment, where we have already set one early intervention center in one of the secondary centers, which is in a semi-urban area. And we have trained paramedics and community health workers. We are trying to integrate these programs with our door-to-door screening program and train them and get more information. So before I end, I would just like to reiterate this quote that children are 1/3 of our population, but maybe all of our future. So we have to take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shailendra. That was very comprehensive, and I think the last quote says it all. I think it's important to focus on children because they are our future, and I think Orbis, with its ReadSoft software, has also played a very important role in giving focus to pediatric care in the community, but also the emerging diseases like ROP and CVI in at least the urban areas where a lot of preterm babies now are surviving is another new area for ophthalmologists to look at and their rehabilitation. So again, please keep putting your questions in the chat box while we move on to the next speaker. So as we've seen with the pediatric care, prevention is even better than cure. And we have an intervention in cornea where if we can prevent corneal ulcers from forming. As we know, almost 30% of the grafts that are done in this country are for active corneal ulcers, and another 25-30% are because of scarring post-corneal ulcers. So why not prevent corneal ulcers from forming altogether? And with SightLife's intervention in UP and also in Nepal, there have been some very interesting methodologies that they have developed for preventing corneal ulcers from happening. So I would request Shefali Sharma from SightLife to talk to us about prevention of abrasions or treatment of abrasions and prevention of ulcers that they have shown in the community. So Shefali, can you put up your slides, and over to you.
Sure, Dr. Umang. Thank you so much. I'll just share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So a very good morning to respected chair, all my panelists and the audience. First of all, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to present my views on prevention better than cure and how it is seen as a paradigm shift in cornea care. And as Dr. Umang said, I am Shefali Sharma, Senior Manager, SightLife, looking after corneal blindness prevention program, both for India as well as Nepal. And as you all know, SightLife is a forefront organization which is dedicated to eliminate corneal blindness worldwide by 2040. That's our vision. So in today's presentation, I will quickly present you with some facts on corneal blindness, followed by a brief overview of SightLife's corneal blindness program. Then I shall quickly present you the learnings that we have gathered and how we have come to the conclusion that prevention is certainly better than cure, and then, propose the way forward. So these are, some of the facts related to corneal blindness. The corneal opacities are one of the leading causes of blindness as per the latest RAB study, the Rapid Assessment of Avoidable Blindness. In people aged 0 to 49 years, corneal disease is the main cause of blindness, and 37.5% cases happen due to corneal opacity in this age group. Whereas if you talk about people greater than or equivalent to 50 years of age, corneal disease is the second major cause of blindness, and 7.4% cases can be accounted for corneal opacity. So those days are over when corneal blindness was considered to be the 8th or the 9th major cause of blindness. It has actually jumped onto the position number 2. From our experience of corneal blindness prevention program, we have come to the conclusion that most of the corneal injuries can be resolved at primary level. Trust me, in our CBP program, we have seen 96% of corneal injury cases can be managed at primary level by a trained team of community health workers. Timely reporting of eye injury and taking prescribed dose of treatment is the key to success. Also noteworthy is that corneal graft survival rates, if you see, they average only around 10 years, which means patients are likely to undergo a kind of retransplant in their lifetime. Corneal blindness prevention initiatives are more required in rural areas, as mostly rural belts carry out the agricultural activities, and most of the corneal injuries happen in the agricultural belts or in the high-risk occupations, which could be anything related to your welding or wooden industries base, etc. So SightLife's corneal blindness prevention program, has successfully kind of, addressed and demonstrated a model of awareness, diagnosis, and preventative treatment in Sitapur district of UP. And also we are working in 2 provinces of Nepal. Objective of this program is threefold. One is to increase awareness about early and appropriate first aid of corneal abrasions amongst community. Number 2 is to build capacity to diagnose and manage corneal abrasions at community level by leveraging existing community health workers. That's what we are currently doing. We don't establish any parallel network, but we utilize all the existing infrastructure made available. And the third one is to establish a referral network between community health workers and next level care, which can be in the form of vision centers and our partner eye hospitals. So if we talk about India, we work with almost 637 community health workers, in 3 blocks of Sitapur districts. And we work with a very robust partner, which is Sitapur Eye Hospital. In Nepal also, we work with almost 150 community health workers in different provinces. So overall, if you see, the program is not very old. We started our journey in India only in early 2018 with just 1 block of Biswa in Sitapur district. And today we have seen, more than 15,000 patients, out of which 55% were the corneal abrasion cases. And out of these, 55% corneal abrasion cases, 96% were being handled and successfully treated at the level of community health workers. So this is how effective a preventative approach and treatment can be in case of eye injury. Coming on, to the learnings which we have gathered so far from our experiences, that, the 3-tier model at ground level has actually done wonders for us. It has worked very well for us, wherein primary care is handled by community health workers, secondary care by vision centers, and the tertiary care has been taken care of by the partner eye hospital. There has been an established track record of successfully treating 96% or more cases at the level of community health workers itself, which I was telling you recently. For referral cases, which account to around 4%, we have been able to successfully close the loop with vision centers and eye hospitals. This is, the credit goes to the way, we work very closely with all our stakeholders, including the eye hospitals. Community health workers feel empowered now as they are, skilled enough to provide basic eye care, including to the men and elders in the rural community. This has drastically established their credibility and acceptability in the community. Successful handling of cases at primary level has reduced a major cost burden on the community. Now there is a reduced need of transplants. The approx cost of one patient, in prevention program is rupees 70. I mean, this is a kind of investment that we do per patient. Whereas if you compare it to the transplant cost, the average is something around rupees 30,000 or even more. So community gets eye care services and the treatment right at their doorstep, of course. And community health workers have become a kind of go-to person for any eye issue at village level. So if there is any eye related injury, they know in our project sites that the first person to be contacted is the ASHA, the community health worker. And all this, as I told you, has increased the recognition of community eye health worker in the community. Now, what we are proposing as a way forward as an organization is, we want to expand the program in more geographies across India and Nepal, because there is tremendous opportunity to do this and there is tremendous need to do this. And we are extremely open and welcoming to have a collaboration with eye care institutions, government agencies, corporate houses, etc., wherein SightLife sees itself more as a technical partner in the program. Thank you, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Shefali. I think that's a great intervention. I think possibly the only intervention we've seen in cornea for prevention of corneal ulcers. And I think it's a very, very important intervention, and I think everybody needs to learn from it and modify. And I think Sitapor's experience, I can see Dr. Madhu there with this intervention, I think is path-breaking. Preventing ulcers, I think corneal transplantation is not the answer for treatment of corneal ulcers. I think it is prevention. I think we can open for a little discussion, and I would invite Dr. Das again for some remarks. I think one of the themes that we've seen throughout these presentations is the integration of health systems and not working in isolation as eye care providers, which generally has been the case with cataract interventions. So integrating health systems with eye care, with the existing systems available, seems to be the next stage for eye care. So Dr. Das, would you like to comment on that?
Well, thanks, Umang. I enjoyed all the three presentations. What is most heartening is that that we are working like gardener. The gardener goes to the plants. Plant never come to the gardener. So unless we adopt the what WHO recently popularizing called integrated people-centric eye care, or what government of India does called health and wellness clinic, those are the required thing. I was very pleased to learn from Chitrakoot that primary screening for DR is not my work, it is somebody else's work, and I can do the next level. That kind of intervention is actually useful. Otherwise, you alone cannot do everything. You have to integrate many people. What just now heard Shefali presenting about the experience in Sitapur and Nepal about preventing, or your statement that transplant is not the cure for corneal ulcer. Why do you want to develop it to corneal ulcer first? So it's wonderful work. And then I enjoyed those publications from your group, because I am always keen on that, because we in South India work more and publish less. We publicize more than publish at all. So those things are coming out. Supposing whatever Shefali presented becomes a publication from Sitapur group, and then whatever I heard from Chitrakoot becomes a publication, because we have to raise our standard to become the internationally recognized group that yes, we work and we work very hard. So I'm very happy to have learned that you are going to community. And then as I told in the morning in the AGM that the new COVID has brought a new challenge. The patients will hardly start larger gathering. We have to go to them, then they coming to us. And the era of mass clinic, mass surgery is gone. and not going to happen again. Let us remember this. However, wish will not going to happen. So we have to put a new way of doing certain things, and we can actually, this will be more effective than otherwise. So, are you hearing? We have only 10 minutes or 5 minutes left for last talk. Rohit joining or not able to join us? Because I know we are in surgery.
Yeah, so I think he would not be there, and I think the organizers want us to finish 5 minutes early. So maybe we can and we can continue taking questions on the chat box. So if I think we could, I think very important talks. I think we enjoyed all the talks. There's a lot to learn from each, and thank you, Dr. Das, for chairing the session. And I think you've set the stage for our next steps for this next decade. And with COVID, I think we have new challenges. And I think it's time to improvise and rethink the way we've worked in the last 2 decades. I think there's a new methodology that needs to be adopted for the future. Where all these talks are very relevant to take our steps forward. So I'd like to thank all the speakers for their wonderful work and their talks. And thank you, Dr. Das, for being here, and the comments that you made are very important to all of us.
Can I have just
Thank you, Dr. Umang.
Umang, can I share something here?
Madhu,
Yeah,
one
sure.
second.
Dr. Das speaking.
Yes, sir, I just want to say something nice and motivating. What Shefali was talking about, integrating it actually. So we had a ready platform with Site Savers program that we had already trained all these ASHAs, not in this, but in general eye care. And then this was just another addition to the whole thing. So ASHAs were familiar with us, and lots of people are doing UPREHP. In that program, all these ASHAs have been trained for eye care of different sorts. So this little add-on on them really makes world of a difference. And this has really helped us, because during this lockdown, I've seen 95% emergencies that we got were only corneal ulcers.
Yes, Dr. Das.
Let me just say one word for Shefali. 1 second. One word for Shefali. Shefali, I understand you are not a doctor, but then all the doctors working in UK are also not called doctors.
Sure, Dr. Das. Yeah, got it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, over to
You know why
Sridevi.
they're called Mr.? Do you know why they're called Mr.? In England, surgery was always done by barbers, not by trained medical professionals. When barbers were actually called doctors in England in 18th, 16th, 17th century, when they got medical professor, they become from Dr. Barber to a Mr. So-and-so.
Yes.
Yes, you are right.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Das and Dr. Umang and all the other participants for this session. Thank you so much. So the next one we have is inclusion in eye health, a comprehensive approach. And for that, I'd like to invite Dr. Harpreet Kapoor to take over and run the session. Dr. Harpreet Kapoor, are you there?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Well, on behalf of CBM, I invite you all, I welcome you all to this session on inclusion in eye health. I'm just trying to share my screen. Is it visible, Sridevi?
Yeah, Dr. Harpreet, but can you, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yes?
now it's okay.
Okay, right.
Yeah, it's okay, Dr.
So yeah, once again, I would like to welcome you all to this session on inclusion in eye health. And as you all know, with the mandate of improving the quality of life of people with disability, over these decades, last few decades, CBM has actually strived to reach out to the marginalized population. I'm unable to. Okay, yeah, got it.
We are
Yeah.
able to hear you, Dr. Heather.
Yes, yeah, right. So no, I was unable to forward my screen slide, so there was a glitch there. But anyway, so like I said, it has been our efforts to reach out to the most vulnerable groups in the community. And so this session will be about inclusion, developing inclusive eye services. I will try to give you an overview of how to incorporate inclusion in eye health, while our subsequent eminent speakers from various partners of CBN will be covering different aspects of inclusion. So here, when we talk about inclusion, it essentially just means that you design your eye programs in a way that they cater to each and every member of the community. So essentially, everyone benefits equally from the eye health services you've designed. So it may be a person with disability, might be physical disability, visual, hearing impairment, psychosocial, or even the other marginalized groups like different people belonging to different ethnic background, race, caste, the elderly, and even and especially the extremely marginalized poor people and even illiterates, and women to some extent in in some context actually. So how do we make our services inclusive? There's no rocket science, I would say there. It is essentially just about identifying the barriers which are there, first of all. If we talk about people with disability, first of all, you just need to identify what barriers exist, which are preventing them from accessing your services. And then all you need to do is just strengthen your programs so as to address each one of these barriers. Okay, if we talk about just a quick review of the recognized barriers, I would say the first and foremost is attitudinal. Once if you get across this one, because this is the most important, if you are able to inculcate a positive change amongst your staff, the doctors, and most importantly, I would say the management and the highest level in the hierarchy. Because if you are able to get a change there, the other steps will automatically follow. And then you can achieve success in making your services inclusive. Of course, it does incorporate in creating a barrier-free environment, providing accessible information. Well, Dr. Deepti will be going into different aspects of creating a barrier-free environment and other steps which we need to take to ensure that we have inclusive services. And I would actually like to draw your attention to achieving inclusion in the present global crisis. Well, we all know how difficult it has been for all of us. These last 2-3 months have been extremely challenging. And if we have been in that situation, I think it's beyond our imagination as to what the plight of the extremely marginalized and vulnerable groups must be. The world has witnessed the plight of migrant population. And so to say, I think now is the time. Of course, we'll be talking about inclusion per se, how to develop inclusive eye services. Like I said, Dr. Deepti will be throwing light on that. But just the same, I would like to suggest and draw your attention to certain measures which we can take now that we are creating these new norms. So it is important that we incorporate inclusion right at the planning stage, and it's best to have a person with disability involved so as to guide the way forward. And of course, some of the things which you can do, I do understand that once we are through the lockdown period, it is only natural to think that, to get back on track, the major focus would be financial, balance. And of course, this is important for sustainability. But just the same, we do need to reach out to each and every individual of the community. And to do that, it is just a few things I have listed here. Like first, just one thing I would like to draw your attention on is like when we talk about bilateral cataract blind, of course, it has always been a priority to address these. But now in this situation, it becomes all the more important because especially if a person who has bilateral blindness from cataract and it is avoidable and it's from the vulnerable group, they are as it is at increased risk, and then they have to be dependent on another person for each and every daily activity of theirs. So the thing about social distancing just is not possible in that case. So that is one. And then I would suggest that the counseling services, now is the time, it is actually the hour of the need. And so because if we have a dedicated counselor who can explain the new norms, the protocols of the hospital, and all to the people who are who have a disability or the other vulnerable groups, it will be quite beneficial for them. I just put this picture of one particular type of mask which has been now increasingly used for the hearing impaired, because as we all know that people who have hearing impairment, they do get visual cues from lip reading, and with masks and all, like obviously they'll be at a loss to understand even the normal normal conversation which is going around them. And especially, and then another aspect is that people with psychosocial problems, they also, when they visit the hospital, as it is, they have a lot of apprehension, but now when they see people moving around in PPE, masks, it becomes overwhelming for them. So there is the need for the counseling services. And of course, clear signages in terms of scan should be displayed actually in the hospital premises so as to inform and educate the population there. Just very quickly, I would like to kind of talk about a bit at the community level. It'll be these pictures there are, I'm happy to share these from our partner Nirfad in Mathura. They had like come into had been able to give a targeted response to people with disability and those who are extremely poor with their interventions early on during March, April. And so in fact it just so happened that they had done a survey of people with disability in the catchment area, and then that's why they could reach out to those people and to be able to kind of provide the facilities for them, the healthcare facilities, and in fact even food items, sanitation kits and all. And last but not the least, the role of vision centers now to reach out to people who are living in remote locations and the vulnerable groups is all the more important. And because they are usually not able to reach, and especially with the lockdown conditions, they are not able to reach the main hospital services. And of course, if teleophthalmology networks are in place, that will be excellent to take care of the medical problems. And of course, there should be a robust system, referral system, so as the surgical patients can be transported to the main healthcare facility. And of course, eye health education and awareness is equally important, should be carried on with considering social distancing norms. And yeah, and I just hope that our little contribution can help us all, and together we can all see the dawn of a new inclusive world in the post-COVID era, if I may wish. Thank you. And now I would like to invite Dr. Praveen Vashist from RP Center, and he'll be sharing his experience and enlightening us about advocacy efforts for inclusion in eye care. And of course, if there are any questions from the audience, kindly type it in the chat box, and we'll try to address these towards the end of all the talks. And, I would also request that if it's a specific question for a specific speaker or faculty, then kindly type in the name of that faculty as well. And we will try to, within the given time constraints, and hopefully if there's no technical glitch, we'll try to address as many as we can. Over to you, Dr. Praveen.
Thank you, Dr. Harpreet. I'll be talking about inclusion in eye care, some advocacy efforts, especially by RP Center. In fact, as far as advocacy is concerned, we can define it as a strategy to gain support or a political commitment for a particular goal or program. So here our goal is very clear that we need to leave no one behind as part of inclusion eye care. And the people who are actually the target group for us in order to achieve a universal eye health, which is our aim, that we need to include people with disabilities because they actually constitute the world's largest minority group. Nearly 20% of the world poor are people with disabilities, and nearly 1/5 of the disabled, they are not having their sight restored. So it is very important that they should be getting proper eye care services. The other vulnerable group, which we think is the women and children, the elderly, the illiterate, people living in rural and tribal areas, even in urban slums, and people below poverty line. You can some example of the recent surveys that almost all type of blindness and visual impairment is more common among women. It is much more common in elderly age group, especially the blindness is more common in rural areas and also among the illiterate. So they're all vulnerable group and they need proper help. When we need to define inclusion eye health, it is basically eye health services that are provided within a barrier-free environment, which are inclusive by design and are sustainable. Now, of course, what we want is that the eye care services should be accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities. And of course, those people having permanent visual loss, they should receive appropriate mobility, living skills, education, rehabilitation, other opportunities for their proper involvement in the program. If I need to exactly define what we need to do in advocacy so that no one is left behind, probably you have to work into 3 different areas. One is the policy domains, where we need to implement human right and policies, and probably we need certain laws for this as People with Disability Act. Then we need to work at the community level, where we need to remove the stigma and discrimination, especially for women and girl child in society. And thirdly, we need to work for removing the barrier so that we can provide equality of opportunity for the people. We need to identify various barriers and we are able to remove them. Ultimately, people and the group, they should be empowered and they can enjoy the human rights. This is a beautiful example, a commonly seen picture, where in first side you say that we are given equal support to all the people. The child with the lowest sight is not able to see the game. In second, it is the equity, where we have given more support to people who need more benefit. But the third figure represents the inclusion, where we actually remove the barrier which was responsible for this kind of inequality among the people. In one of the important area for advocacy is the community-based rehabilitation. What we need is a community comprehensive right-based approach so that people can be included as part of the community. They should be empowered. The human right model of disability, the principles of awareness, participation, and comprehensive accessibility, they should be achieved using a twin track approach for people and involving them into the community. And the CBR is working 5 domains. We have to work for everyone in these 5 domains, that is health, education, livelihood, social inclusion, and empowerment. As was RP Center, we started our journey with the CBM in 2015, and it was basically initially we planned to strengthen our low vision clinic in RP Center and also to start community-based rehabilitation services for the visually impaired. And since for last 5 years, I'll be giving what advocacy efforts we have tried. In 2019, in fact, from a low vision clinic, we developed into a visual rehabilitation training center. I'm thankful to CBM that their international CEO, they came and started this center, and we're providing all the training and rehabilitation for in blindness and low vision rehabilitation. As far as advocacy concerned, we have worked in 3 different levels, working at the ministry And in ministry, basically for advocacy, we have two different programs. One, the National Program for Control of Blindness, and other is the Ministry of Social Justice Empowerment. And also working at the community level at local contests with NGOs and in blind schools. One important thing which we're able to show as a proof that we did national survey and we could identify these are actually people who need more services and they need more inclusion, like women, the illiterates, the rural population. And in fact, now recently we started another comprehensive survey on disability, where all type of disabilities have been included. And with the next 2 years, we'll be providing more data, evidence on disability in our country. Another important thing, working with Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, this is a big achievement that we are able to provide revised guidelines for disability certification for our country. And these guidelines are comprehensive. They are in 21 different disabilities, including blindness and visual impairment. We had various meetings with Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. I'm happy to say that in their ADIP list, we're able to get included the things which are required for visually impaired people. Previously, there were more things were there mainly for the aids and appliance for other different disabilities, but now it is there for visually impaired also. We conducted 2 national level workshops where we tried to start low vision rehabilitation services in various RIOs. In fact, we are happy to share that this LVR service have been started in Guwahati, in Rohtak, in Patna, Bangalore, Ahmedabad, and Cuttack. These RIOs and some more RIOs will be adding these services very soon. In fact, we had multiple meetings with state program officers, district program managers, and NGO in Delhi, and we have started mobility training for the visually challenged people in RP Center. And in this program, a lot of local NGOs are involved as trainer, and they are providing these services along with RP Center. When we talk about the community, we are very happy to being at the apex level institute. Still, we are able to start 28 vision centers in Delhi and NCR region, and their CBR component and counseling for visually impaired is one of the component in these vision centers. We are providing services as close to community as possible. There are different 25 schools for blinds are daily. In fact, our teams are going in these schools regularly and providing services in these blinds school for the blinds. Plus, the best part is that we are able to develop networking with nearly 50 NGOs who are working for the rehabilitation of visually impaired. And this is a mutual partnership. They are sending people for clinical examination and for services at RP Center, and we are sending patients from here, people from here, for various rehabilitation services that include education, vocational training, and other different kind of trainings to these NGOs. And recently, this is something new which I would like to share with CBM also, that we are starting a program where WHO CRO countries, they will be trained to start low vision rehabilitation services. And we have submitted a proposal. In fact, this will be funded by WHO CRO, where we'll be strengthening services in Bangladesh, Nepal, Myanmar, and Bhutan. In fact, recently we also developed a handbook for assisted devices for people, and that was very well appreciated by WHO. In fact, I'm really thankful to CBM that they are given opportunity to RP Center to actually do some activities related to advocacy for blind and visually impaired people in the country. Thank you very much. Thank you. Harpreet.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Praveen. That was really very informative, and we are really glad that the top nodal center is able to reach out to the grassroots level. And with your efforts, I'm sure we are able to, very soon we'll see an inclusive world, at least here in India, we'll be able to achieve that. And also you said the other CRO countries, so that's great. I would now like to invite Dr. Deepti from St. John's Hospital to share her experience in implementing disability inclusive eye care services. Over to you, Dr. Deepti.
Thanks, Dr. Harpreet. I hope my slides are seen and I am audible.
You are audible, but right now we are seeing Dr. Praveen's. Okay, yeah, there. Yes.
Can you see my slides? Okay. Yes. Thanks, Dr. Harpreet, and a very good afternoon to all of you. It's nice to hear all of you, not much see all of you, though it's Vision 2020. But what to do, COVID times, and we have to go along with that. So I thank CBM for giving me the opportunity to talk about implementing disability inclusive eye care services. So I'll be sharing a little bit of what is disability inclusive eye care services. Many of the points have already been discussed with the esteemed panelists and some of the great speakers before me. So let me start a little bit. 10% of world's population live with a disability, and most of them are in developing countries like ours. People with disability constitutes the world's largest minority. An estimated 80% of the people with disability live in developing countries and in the conditions of poverty. They also tend to experience higher unemployment, and women with disability often experience greater discrimination than men. So this gives an idea of where we have to concentrate in terms of inclusion. As far as Indian census goes, I do know that next year we are due for one more census, but according to the 2011 census, 2.21% of our population have disability. And among them, males have a higher proportion of disability, as you can see, 55.9% as compared to females. In terms of domains of disability, visual impairment constitutes the largest disability domain, along with locomotor and speech and hearing. Now, what is disability inclusion? Disability inclusion is a rights-based perspective and a broad approach for actively ensuring people with disability are included and are benefited equally from a wide range of activities. I think this has been mentioned many times by many speakers today. Disability inclusions can apply to different kinds of programs, for example, health, education, and infrastructure. Small changes are required so that needs of people with disabilities as well as those who do not have a disability are met. So it is both. Disability is for everybody. Inclusion in eye health. Inclusion in eye health service means that the service addresses the specific needs of vulnerable groups, including the underprivileged, women, elderly, and people with disability. Inclusion should start from screening, outreach, outpatient services, counseling, medical and surgical treatment, and with the provision of assistive devices like spectacles or low vision aids. Disability inclusive approach to eye health is strongly linked to Vision 2020 objectives and the principle which promotes the right to sight, implying right to eye health services. Now, if I have to really put it in four categories, these are the four guiding principles. First is participation. Inclusive approaches must uphold nothing about us without us, slogan of the disability rights movement from around the world. Participation of people with any vulnerability, especially disabilities, is fundamental to achieve inclusive eye health. Access. Access is essentially about identifying barriers people experience and addressing these barriers. Common barriers to health services may be financial, attitudinal, environmental, or information provision. Addressing these requires a range of strategies. Linkages with community-based organization. Inclusive practices require eye health services to have relationship and linkages with a range of community-based organization. Referral networks between eye health services and such organizations are very important and are very needed for strong inclusive practice. The types of organizations which are particularly important are CBOs, CBR services, DPOs, and educational facilities. Individualized information and counseling. When a diagnosis occurs, the eye has the responsibility to basic information and counseling, which is planned within the context of the socio-demographic background and vulnerability. Participation. Let's see each of this a little bit in the context of eye care service. Participation. The first is community eye activities. Health promotion activities are an important part of any eye health service and should include persons from various backgrounds.
May I request all the participants to keep their mic in the muted mode, please? May I request the participants to keep their mics on muted mode, please? And thank you, and Dr. Deep.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Harpreet. Health promotion activities are an important part of any eye health service and should include persons from various backgrounds, including disability. Addressing local eye health needs through promotion can prevent blindness, an important goal of eye health service, and this provides an opportunity to promote positive messages regarding disability and other conditions. The second is screening and identification. These screening activities can occur in a variety of settings, commonly within the community with active involvement of CBOs, including DPOs, women's groups, etc. These are often the first point of contact a person with vision impairment or any other condition, including disability, with eye health service, and they are referred for further follow-up. Transport to the actual health service is a common barrier experienced by people who are disadvantaged and impoverished. It is often limited in nature or expensive or unreliable or inaccessible. Hence, transport of beneficiaries becomes an important part of eye care participation. Arrival at eye health facility and registration is the first contact a person has with any service. These services should ensure the active participation of the staff in welcoming, accommodating, and being sensitive to the person coming from different socioeconomic, ethnic, educational, and medical background. What is access? Access is basically identifying the barriers and doing something about it. Now, you all know that there are standard guidelines to improve the physical access to inclusive eye health buildings. Externally, if I have to say, pavement leading to the building should be clear, flat, and non-slippery, with entrance having clear signages. There should be at least one building entrance with a ramp built with standard guidelines. The gradient, for example, of a ramp should be 1:14. Outdoor steps should have a color contrast at the top surface, and raised markings, which are tactile indicators at the surface, at the points of surface change. Internally, we can have, there should not be any floor level changes. The changes in floor or ground surface should be indicated by painting with edge with a color that strongly contrasts the floor color. Mats or floor covering should be strictly avoided to prevent any tripping and falling. Collection of health information system is a part of any quality. It provides a knowledge on accessibility. How? Health information provides an important opportunity to learn about patients. This information can be used to improve the access of eye care services. What about the attitudinal barriers? We have to build up capacity. We should train our ophthalmology postgraduate students, the eye care nursing students, the refractionist students to understand the various vulnerable groups, including persons with disability, and the usage of international classification of functioning. They have to receive training on how to communicate with various groups like elderly, women, children, disabled. They should know to identify the possible barriers to access eye care services and minimize or eliminate these barriers, especially attitudinal, physical, and institutional barriers. What am I talking about? Linkages. As you all know that local eye health service and CBO and DPO can meet regularly, establish strong, reliable referral. They can receive training regarding eye health. They can refer and even undertake basic screening in the communities and even sometimes organize outreach eye clinics. And this has been the experience of St. John's as well as I'm sure several other eye organizations. Once a diagnosis has been made and appropriate information and counseling has been delivered to the beneficiary, the individual who has been diagnosed with low vision or to have blindness should be appropriately referred to a community-based organization or a disabled people's organization or even a disability service organization as the case may be for further rehabilitation. The process of referral requires to be consistent, reliable, and efficient, and all patients require to be referred. What about this individualized delivery of information and counseling? Basically to diagnose and review permanent blindness and low vision. It is essential that the process of diagnosis and subsequent information provision and counseling occurs in a quality patient-focused manner. Since the human resource and time required is constrained, as we all know, a short checklist approach of information for patients should make significant difference in follow-ups and better outcomes. The information, most important, should be accessible and available in a format which can be understood by all, including people who are not educated, women, children, and different types of disabilities. The most important, which is very, very crucial, is the clear intent of the leadership to transform and reform. Inclusion in an eye health service requires supportive management, especially the program managers and the senior staff. Small changes required for inclusion has to be initially prompted and encouraged by the leadership team. So if I have to conclude, to summarize, inclusion means 4 important things. Participation, make sure everybody participates. There is an access to eye care services to everybody, including disability, women, children, linkages with every community-based organization, including the government-based organizations, individualized information and counseling, which is available for all. So with this, I conclude my session. I thank CBM, I thank Vision 2020 for providing me this opportunity to present. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Deepti, for giving us an in-depth insight into how to develop inclusive eye care services. And I would now like to invite Mr. Kuldeep Singh of Seva Foundation to share his experience in gender-sensitive approach for inclusion in eye care. And as Dr. Kuldeep, Mr. Kuldeep, if I may request you, can I have 1 minute of your talk? Because we have to now cut 1 minute from each talk because we have to stick on time. And as it is, we've been told to wind up 5 minutes earlier. So please, Mr. Kuldeep, and thanks again in anticipation. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Harpreet. I will be brief, and also mostly I will talking about the experiences that has come from the ground. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the different experiences that different women are accessing the eye care services across the country. So the presentation will cover basically two parts over next 6 or 7 slides. The first part is the gender data of accessing the eye care, which many of my previous panelists has talked about in the theory, and I will be sharing a little bit of the practice part on that. And the second part is the learning and experiences that we have learned from the different partners, and many of them are attending here. So I welcome their insight and also their input across during this presentation as well. So I'm just trying to, yeah. So this is a basic picture many of my previous panelists have prepared, has shared. Out of the 55% visually impaired women, I just accessed the India's Gender Development Index released last year, which says women earn less, live longer, have less education, and also have all score less in all HDI parameters, which and also have the higher life expectancy, which generally underline that there should be more women in our women should be accessing the eye care services across our partner hospitals and all the partners who are here. And what I'm going to do is to share the 3 different data sets coming from the vision centers, from the school screening program, as well as the hospital partners of Seva. The data include last 2 year to 5 year. So when I analyze the data of vision center, 36 vision center have same program design across country and established from 2016 to 2019. The services that I have analyzed was more than 1,74,000, and there are 49% females accessing the service in the vision center. And when I say service, it's the spectacles, it's treatment, surgery, and referrals. So although the percentage looks less, but if I go back to my previous slide, which says the 55% women are visually impaired, then this number become a lot higher in actual terms. And again, when I look at the data of the children, there were only 43% in children in the vision center, the female children I'm talking about. So it means, although, and this is the best case scenario out of the all that I'm going to present to you. The second data set when I analyzed was close to 200,000 pediatric school screening program done by our partners in Delhi, Maharashtra, and West Bengal. It was done by HPD, Shraf, as well as NNN. And the data shows that there were only 47% the girls in the school. Normally, we assume that there will be girls equal to the boys in the school, and there was no biasness in the program design in general, but still there are less girls, which means there is something we are not answering or addressing. And when you go further a little bit and see the data of the actually glasses received in this data set, only 46% were the girls. So there is something we are trying, but we are not hitting the point. And in next 3 or 4 slides, I'm going to share some of the learning that we have learned from many of you. And one of the biggest experiences of that Seva has learned from the many partners, if there is a data, then only you can manage what you are doing. So without data, you can't track anything, you can't analyze anything, and you also will not be able to make the evidence-based decision. So this is super important. Also, if you are going to see the access, referral, acceptance, and all the service benchmark that mostly we talk about. So this is another data set, and I promise this is the last data set I'm going to share with you. I will not overwhelm you with this data set. So actually this is the data of Seva partner hospitals across the country. And this represents more than 10 million patient visit and 1 million cataract surgery in last 4 years, from January 2016 till December 2019. So if you see the number of patients seen, and this data is actually divided quarter by quarter. So if you see, there is a trend starting from the January 2016, the number of women accessing services, the blue line, they are in between 48 to 49%. There was only one quarter where it was 50%, which means again, although there are more women who need eye care services, they are not coming to our hospitals. So there is something. And then when you go a little bit further in this one, how many women receive the cataract surgery? The data, again, it varies, but there is a little bit positive sign here. The women receiving the cataract surgery in Seva's partner hospital, almost 70 of them, there are more women who receive the cataract surgery in comparison to the men. But still we are not touching the 55% mark, which the World Vision Report generally talk about. So there is a huge positive sign here, but we are still much behind what we are supposed to achieve. So in last 1 minute, I'm going to briefly share one of the gender survey that Seva did. Close to 40 partners responded, and most of them are present here. One of the reasons that they share why they are having this gender segregated data, because of course 40% were kind of using this data for improving services, but many of them also suggested because this is a donor requirement, and that's why they are having this gender segregated data. And some of the steps and points they have mentioned that are useful: having only female camp, working with ASHA worker, different community-based group. I will not take much time, and feel free to add your inputs if in the chat box if you have something beyond this which is not covered in the slide. And there is one last slide which I want to talk about. If we are going to connect with the women that need our services, there is a lot of systemic change that needs to happen. There is a technology coming in place, Swasth app, recently being launched by almost all the major healthcare providers, allow you to access a free doctor by a phone. And then there are different examples of the self-help group, from Kutumsri in Kerala to Ajivika Mission in Bihar and UP and Rajasthan. And then Seva is also working to come up with a dashboard for all of our partner hospitals, which will allow them to access all the data across the last 6 or 7 years. And this is the last slide. I want to add one more point in Dr. Vasist inequality and equity and equality that he's shown. We need to talk about gender justice. Equality and equity will not be enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kuldeep, for this excellent presentation. And we really thank you for sharing your experience and especially the results and learnings of your survey on gender-based practices. And now I would like to invite Dr. Sibyl Mishramkar from Velamagna Bidar to share her experience on reaching out to various ethnic groups and the elderly as she continues to do her work in the field of ophthalmology. Dr. Sibyl, over to you. Dr. Sybil, we can see your slides, but we can't hear you.
Can you just shut off the thing and start it again?
Please ensure that we close at 12:30 because we have got another important talk.
Dr. Sybil, please unmute your.
He's on unmute only. Yeah, please go ahead. We're able to hear you now.
Please ensure that we close at 12:30 the session because next session start at 12:30 sharp. Can you hear me all?
Yeah, I can hear. I cannot hear Sybil, and yeah, we should finish on time. But I can't really hear. Can others hear?
No, I cannot hear her.
We can hear only TP Das, not to Sybil.
Yeah,
He is-
same here.
He has unmuted his mic, but we're not able to hear him.
I suggest we can go to the
Dr. Sarah, would you like to then? I think since we can't hear Sybil and we are running short of time, Dr. Sybil, please can you give your conclusive remarks and yeah, over to you,
Sarah
Dr.
can
Sybil.
conclude. Sarah can
Dr.
conclude.
Sarah, sorry, Dr. Sarah.
Okay. Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry that we are unable to hear Dr. Sybil. I think we have very little time, so I would just like to say thank you to the eminent speakers, Professor Harpreet, Professor Praveen, Professor Deepthi, Kuldeep, and we wanted to give a flavor of what all it means to be inclusive.
Yeah, you can join. We are ready.
Time right now,
Is
though.
not just speaking about people with disabilities, also including making sure that we reach out to women, we reach out to other marginalized groups, tribals, vulnerable populations, and ethnic groups. While I'm speaking, I think we can see Dr. Sybil's slides. She's mentioning also the importance of reaching out to people with leprosy, which is another group which is often omitted in this. As we need to end now, I'm really very sorry that we cannot hear from Dr. Sybil, but thanks to all the speakers. And I would just like to highlight what Dr. Harpreet said, that we need to make sure that our programs benefit everyone equally, that no one is left behind. Whether illiterate, whether women, whether people from ethnic minorities, making sure that each one of them has equal access to our eye care programs. Thank you all.
Yeah, I saw him join.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah, for your conclusive remarks. And over to you, Sridevi. Thank you all.
Can you stop the share screen, please?